This is the World History AGS textbook, Chapter 4, Middle Eastern Empires, from 800 BC to 330 BC. Some pre-reading tips again. You can find vocabulary words off to the left of each page. They're in a box. They're also in bold print in the text. Those will help you as you read throughout each section to understand the words and the context there. Another good pre-reading tip would be to look at the questions at the end of each section and then the chapter review so that you have a better understanding of the information that you're reading for. Let's begin with Section 1, the Assyrians. Between 900 BC and 700 BC, the Assyrian Empire, or nation, began to develop in Mesopotamia. It developed on the eastern side of the Fertile Crescent in the Tigris River Valley. The Assyrians were a fierce tribe of warriors. Their enemies hated and feared them. For several hundred years, they dominated or controlled the cities and trading routes of Mesopotamia. Why did people fear the Assyrians? The Assyrian soldiers had iron weapons. The Assyrians had learned to smelt iron from people known as the Hittites. The smelting process required 3 steps. First, the artisan or worker heated the iron until it was red hot. Second, the artisan hammered the iron to remove unwanted materials. Third, the artisan quickly cooled the iron. Then the iron was shaped into weapons. These were harder and stronger than the copper and bronze weapons other armies used. The Assyrian army divided itself into groups. Some became charioteers who drove chariots, 2-wheeled horse-drawn carriages. The army also had a cavalry. These soldiers on horseback were the first of their kind, but the most feared soldiers were the archers who fought with bows and arrows. How did the Assyrian army attack? With its iron weapons, the Assyrian army became a fighting machine. On the field of battle, the soldiers marched forward shoulder to shoulder. Then they let fly a shower of iron-tipped arrows. These killed and wounded the enemy. Next, the cavalry and the charioteers attacked. They wore iron helmets and breastplates. They carried iron spears and swords. Their weapons and their skilled force forced the enemy to run back into the city and hide behind its walls. But walls did not stop the Assyrians. They battered down the gates with a thick iron-tipped tree trunk. Sometimes they tunneled under the walls or climbed over them on ladders. What did the Assyrians do when they won? After beating their enemies, the Assyrians burned some alive or cut their heads off. Others they made into slaves. Then they forced them to move to lands far from home. Next, the Assyrians looted the city. That is, they took away everything they wanted. Finally, they burned and captured the city to the ground. Where was the Assyrian capital? Everyone in Mesopotamia feared the Assyrians. Who could win against them? Some paid tribute rather than fight. That is, they gave offerings or gifts to the kings of Assyria. This tribute, the loot won in war, and taxes made the Assyrian kings rich. One of these kings used this money to build the mighty capital. There he ruled his empire. Nineveh on the Tigris River was the largest city of its day. In 650 BC, King Assurbanipal made it the showplace of the ancient world. Assurbanipal was one of the most powerful kings on earth. He boasted, "I am Assurbanipal, the great king, the mighty king, king of kings." He had a scribe carve these words on stone. How did King Assurbanipal help historians? At his palace in Nineveh, Assurbanipal set up a library. There he collected and saved the ancient writings from the old Mesopotamian kings of Sumer and Akkad. Hundreds of years later, in AD 1852, an archaeologist uncovered what was left of his library. He found 22,000 clay tablets. These tablets contained dictionaries which gave the same words in different languages. Some listed names of kings and important events in the ancient world. Still others contained songs and stories about the past. These tablets helped historians learn about life in the ancient Middle East. How did the king govern the empire? The Assyrian Empire included all of Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, and Egypt. To help rule all this land, the Assyrian king divided it into provinces or areas. Then he chose a governor for each province. This governor collected taxes and made sure that everyone obeyed the king's laws. The king needed to control his empire and keep it connected. The Assyrians built a road system. They made all the roads level so that chariots traveled easily on them. Because of these roads, merchants and soldiers moved quickly from Nineveh to the provinces. Why did the Assyrian Empire fall? The Assyrian Empire became too large to govern or rule. People who had lost wars against the Assyrians began to rebel or disobey them. Fighting began. Soon the Chaldeans from Babylon and the Medes from Persia made an alliance. They agreed to help one another fight the Assyrians. In 612 BC, the Babylonians, Medes, and other armies captured the city of Nineveh and destroyed it. People throughout the empire celebrated. Section 1 Review. On a separate sheet of paper, write true if the statement is true, or false if the statement is not true. Make each false statement true by changing the underlined word. Question 1. The Assyrians learned to smelt iron from the Medes. The underlined word being Medes. 2. Soldiers who fight on horses are called the cavalry. Cavalry being the underlined word. 3. The capital of Assyria was Nineveh. Nineveh, the underlined word. Number 4. The Assyrians built a system of dikes to connect their empire. Dikes is the underlined word. 5. The Medes and the Chaldeans won the war with the Assyrians. The underlined word is Chaldeans. Section 2. The Chaldeans. Like the Assyrians, the Chaldeans defeated many different peoples. After destroying Nineveh, they became the leading Middle Eastern empire. We often call their society Neo-Babylonia or the New Babylonia. Their ancestors were the people Hammurabi ruled hundreds of years before. Who did King Nebuchadnezzar defeat? One of the greatest Chaldean kings was Nebuchadnezzar. Under his rule, the Chaldean Empire expanded or stretched as far west as Syria and Canaan. Nebuchadnezzar defeated the army of Egypt when it tried to take over Syria and Phoenicia. He ruled the Hebrew or Jewish people too. After years of warfare, his armies defeated the Jews in 586 BC. Soldiers destroyed Jerusalem and its temple. They marched 15,000 Jews to Babylon as slaves. What made Babylon beautiful? Nebuchadnezzar made the city of Babylon the most beautiful city in the ancient Middle East. In AD 1899, a German archaeologist found ancient Babylon. He discovered that a long wall, 300 feet high and 80 feet wide, surrounded the city. The wall was so wide that a chariot with 4 horses could turn around on top of it. From its 250 towers, soldiers watched for the enemy. People in chariots entered the city through several bronze gates. A broad street ran down the center of Babylon. At one end stood a beautiful gate of bricks coated with a blue glaze or shiny polish. Animal sculptures or carvings decorated the gate. Red brick sidewalks ran down both sides of this long street. Carved into each brick was the message, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, who made this." What were the Hanging Gardens? Nebuchadnezzar's palace had walls covered with brightly colored tiles. The most famous part of the palace was the Hanging Gardens. Some say that Nebuchadnezzar built the gardens for a queen who had lived in a mountainous country. The king built terraced or stepped gardens, which rose upward like a mountain. In them he planted the flowers and bushes of the queen's homeland. He had well water pumped up to the terraces to water the plants. How did high priests use the ziggurat of Babylon? The highest building in Babylon was a 300-foot ziggurat. From the top of this great temple, the Chaldean priests studied the night sky. These early astronomers mapped the heavens and tracked the sun, the planets, and the stars. Some groups of stars brought pictures to the astronomers' minds. They called these star pictures constellations. In fact, they saw 12 constellations evenly spaced across the sky. These became the zodiac. The astronomers believed that the stars predicted or told the future. They thought that stars had power over a person's life. For many years, the Chaldean priests observed or viewed the night sky. They broke time into 7-day weeks. They also figured out the length of the year. Why did the Chaldean Empire fall? While Nebuchadnezzar ruled, the city of Babylon was a great trading and learning center. But after he died in 562 BC, war broke out. The Chaldeans and the people they had conquered or defeated did not like the kings who followed Nebuchadnezzar. The book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible describes how Babylon was destroyed. In 538 BC, King Belshazzar held the great feast. Suddenly a strange hand appeared and wrote mysterious words on the wall. No one except Daniel, a young Hebrew, could interpret the writing. Daniel told the king what the words meant. His days were coming to an end, and the Persian army would defeat his empire. That night the Persians killed Belshazzar. Cyrus the king, the great king of Persia, captured Babylon. The Chaldean Empire then became part of the Great Persian Empire. The Section 2 review. Use the words from the word bank to complete each sentence. Question 1. The Middle Eastern Empire that Nebuchadnezzar ruled was the blank. Number 2. The capital of his empire was 3. One of the wonders of this capital was its 4. Blank died in 562 BC. Question 5. The Chaldean priests became this, for they mapped the night skies. Section 3. The Persians. In 538 BC, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, defeated the Chaldeans. In a few years, he conquered all his neighbors. Under later kings, the Persian Empire stretched more than 3,000 miles, from the Nile River of Egypt to the Indus River of India. Because the Persian Empire was large, Darius I, another king, divided it into 20 provinces. A governor ruled each province. To keep an eye on his governors, he hired government inspectors. They became the eyes and ears of the king. Traveling around the empire, they reported back to the king. How did the Persians keep their empire together? To hold their empire together, the Persians built a great system of roads. One road stretched for more than 1,600 miles. It took merchants 3 months to go from one end to the other, but messages from the king went faster than this. Horseback riders carried these messages across the empire. They could stop at 100 different places to change horses. The Persians could relay or pass along messages in 1 week, not 3 months. Another way to unify or connect the empire was to use the same weights and measures throughout the land. Because of this, doing business was easier. How did coins help traders? From a people called the Lydians, the Persians got the idea of using metal coins. Then 2 people no longer had to barter or trade things. The problem with bartering is that both people must want to trade something of equal worth. Money took care of this problem. How did the Persians treat others? The Persians treated other people fairly. They did not destroy a city when they conquered it. They also did not loot from the people they defeated. They let conquered people keep their own language and religion. They even allowed some groups to follow their own laws. The Persians did ask everyone to pay taxes, but the taxes were small. What was life like for the Persians? The art of Persia tells us how people lived. It shows rich men on horseback, Slaves carry others on litters or stretchers. The men often had long beards and wore makeup on their faces and eyelids. Women were not allowed much freedom. They lived apart from the men. Girls were taught to be good wives and mothers. Boys were taught to ride horses, use the bow and arrow, and speak the truth. The Persians protected merchants, but they refused to become traders. Why? Because they thought that buying or selling made people selfish. It made them lie and cheat other people. So Persians became soldiers, farmers, or shepherds. Who was Zoroaster? The Persians worshipped many gods. Then, in about 570 BC, a religious leader called Zoroaster began to preach. He told people that there were two forces in the world. One force was goodness and light, the other evil and dark. Zoroastrianism had a strong influence on other religions, especially Judaism and Christianity. Both religions share the idea of life after death and a final reward or punishment. Section 3 review is multiple choice. Choose the correct letter of the answer that would complete the statement correctly. Question number 1. The great king of the Persian Empire was? Number 2. The Persian Empire stretched from Egypt to? Number 3. The Persian Empire held this many provinces. 4. The Persians built a system of? And 5. To trade things without using money is to? And this completes Chapter 4. Please complete the chapter review. Questions number 1 through 10 of the identifying facts, 1 through 5 of the multiple choice, and 1 and 2 of the understanding main ideas. You do not have to complete the critical thinking section.